Clarence Brooks was a trailblazer of African-American cinema. He helped found the first black motion picture production company, achieved stardom in silent films, easily transitioned into the Talkies, and had a co-starring role in a major Hollywood studio talkie in 1931, which was almost unheard of for most African-American actors at that time. But he then drifted into B-movies and character parts. What happened? Join me as I investigate. Clarence was born in 1896 in San Antonio. While I cannot find much information about his early life, I can safely assume that he began acting at a young age because by the time that he was 20, he was already helping to create a motion picture studio. That studio was the first African-American motion picture production studio, the Lincoln Motion Picture Company, which Clarence founded in 1916 with Noble Johnson, Dudley Brooks, Dr. James T. Smith, and George Perry Johnson. This group of men decided to create the company for several reasons. First, most movie studios at that time ignored the wants of the African-American movie-going public. Black audiences hardly ever saw a black actor on the screen, and when they did, that actor was forced to perform their character as a stereotype. The Lincoln Motion Picture Company strived to not only produce films for black audiences, but to also, according to Black Cinema Connection, correct the distortions of African-American images in motion pictures and depict the reality of African-American life. While Clarence was the secretary for the company, he also became one of their first actors. In 1919, the company produced their fourth picture, A Man's Duty, which saw Clarence playing the leading character. He went on to star in one more film for the company, 1921's By Right of Birth. While a large segment of the film is lost, there thankfully are a few minutes that have survived. As you can see here, Clarence portrays Mr. Jordan, the debonair man that comes to the rescue of the heroine played by Anita Thompson. Unfortunately, in 1923, the Lincoln Motion Picture Company disbanded, but Clarence was determined to go on acting. According to Regeneration, he founded the Rosebud Film Corporation in Hollywood and was finally able to produce his first film in 1928, Absent, with himself as the leading man. This film is sadly lost. In 1930, Rosebud Films produced Clarence's Talkie debut, the musical Georgia Rose, which co-starred Evelyn Prier. The film, sadly also lost, appears to have done quite well. In 1931, Clarence Brooks appeared in his most famous and biggest film, Aerosmith, co-starring with Ronald Colman, Helen Hayes, and Myrna Loy. In a usually unheard of opportunity for an African-American actor at that time, Clarence had a major starring role in a mostly white film made for a major mainstream Hollywood movie studio. He portrayed Dr. Oliver Marchand, who, along with Coleman's Dr. Aerosmith, sought to cure an outbreak of the bubonic plague in the West Indies. In some of the film's best scenes, Clarence's Dr. Marchand is the man with the plan, so to speak, the doctor that comes to Dr. Aerosmith with new ideas about how to combat the deadly outbreak. Clarence's performance in this film is truly remarkable. After completing Aerosmith, Clarence appears to have gone into semi-retirement. In 1935, he was convinced by another trailblazing African-American film artist, the director Oscar Micheaux, to star as lawyer Henry Glory in Murder in Harlem, a film that concerned Glory defending an innocent African-American man who was framed for a murder that was committed by a white criminal. After completing this film, Clarence starred in 5 more quote-unquote race films in the 1930s. Race films were a term that was used to designate films that were made by African-American artists for African-American audiences. In most of these films, Brooks appears to have been in supporting character roles. He played a business executive in Dark Manhattan in 1937, a boxing trainer in Spirit of Youth in 1938, and then co-starred 3 times in a row between 38 and 39 as villains, including John Barker in Two Gun Man from Harlem, Buck in The Bronze Buckaroo, and Bradley in Harlem Rides the Range. In 1941, Clarence semi-retired again. According to Black Cinema Connection, the independent studios that produced race films were being bought out by major Hollywood studios so they could produce their own African-American movies, such as 20th Century Fox's Stormy Weather in 1943. In 1946, Clarence returned to motion pictures again, but this time as uncredited small roles. He was memorable, though, as a porter in the Bing Crosby musical Blue Skies in 1946, as you can see in this clip. After appearing in a few more roles in films and one on television in the TV series Biff Barker, Clarence retired for good in 1953. He lived the rest of his life in quiet retirement with his wife, Sherry Hale, until his death at age 72 in 1969. So, we are left with the question, why did Clarence Brooks' screen stardom falter in the talkies after his appearance in Aerosmith? It's honestly hard to say. The one source I found says that he wanted to take a break, which is understandable as he had been going for 15 plus years in the movie business. When he was coaxed back out of retirement 4 years later, he was able to resume starring in African American films and then move into being a character actor in some of those films before that genre petered out in the early 40s. Unfortunately, he only made a few uncredited appearances after that, which was a common occurrence for several of his peers from the silent days. Whatever the case, we are fortunate to have one of his silent films and most of his talkies to view. Most of these films are available on YouTube, and I cannot recommend all of them enough. You will never see Clarence portray the same character in more than one film. Even if the character types are similar, he meticulously adds some nuance that makes the character stand apart on its own. What a talent, what a trailblazer, what a legend. Please like this video and subscribe or follow this account if you want to learn more about the history of silent film stars whose stardom lasted only briefly in the talkies. Up next, join me as I cover the silent talkie career of Eleanor Boardman. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a great week.